Welcome back to Christian Tradition. This week we're talking about the church. Last week we talked about the day the world changed, Pentecost. But as the fire of that day settled, a new reality began to take shape. Only a few days later, as recounted in Acts 3:11-26, Peter stood in Solomon's Portico to reveal that the church was not a new invention, but the long-awaited fulfillment of the greatest rescue mission in history, the new Exodus. Standing in the shadow of the temple, Peter pointed directly back to the blueprint given at Sinai, quoting Deuteronomy 18:15 and 18-19. He identified Jesus as a new Moses. The Lord God will raise up for you a prophet from your brethren as he raised me up. You shall listen to him in whatever he tells you. This wasn't just a sermon, it was an announcement. Peter was warning that every soul that does not listen to that prophet shall be destroyed from the people. The church was being gathered as a restored people of God, and the march had officially begun. The transition was a new thing the prophets had long anticipated. As Jeremiah 16:14-15 promised, a day would come when my people would no longer swear by the God who brought Israel out of Egypt, but by the God who gathers his people out of all the countries where he had driven them. This was a gathering we see in the church, the visible assembly called from every nation to follow the King. The strategy of the march was always written in the map. In Isaiah 43:19, the Lord declared, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness." That way is the path the church now walks. It is a visible road through the desert of this world, leading the people of God not to an earthly Canaan, but into the very life of the Creator. To understand the nature of the gathering Peter announced in the Portico, we have to look back to the Sinai wilderness. Long before the upper room, God called his people out of the slavery of Egypt to stand before him at the foot of the mountain. They weren't just a crowd of refugees, they were the Qahal, the formal summoned assembly of God. In the Greek translation of the scriptures used by the apostles, this word, Qahal, was translated as Ekklesia, which is a word we translate today as church. This is why Stephen in Acts 7:38 could look back at that moment and speak of the church in the wilderness centuries before the first Pentecost. This was a blueprint. It wasn't an invisible feeling or a loose group of individuals. It was a visible ordered society with a law, a mission, and a clear chain of command. The march of the new Exodus is not a new invention. It is a continuation of that ancient assembly now gathered under a new Moses to move toward a new horizon. The march moves through the water, following the footprints of history. Centuries ago, the waters of the Jordan stood aside for Joshua as he led the 12 tribes of Israel into the land of promise to end the first Exodus. Now Jesus stands in those same waters to begin the new. In Mark 1:9-11, the King descends into the river, not to conquer a plot of land, but to open the way into the divine life. As he goes down into the water, the heavens are torn open. The word in the original Greek text is schizomenos, signalling that the barrier between God and man is finally falling. The King has stepped into the river, and the 12 tribes are being called to follow him into a new kind of freedom. This isn't just a personal moment, it's a public announcement. Just as the first Exodus began with a passage through water, the new Exodus begins here. The assembly is being prepared to follow the King through the waters of baptism into the wilderness of this world, leaving the slavery of the past behind. Amor lux eterna, High on the mountain, the strategy for the entire march is confirmed. In a moment of blinding light, the past and future meet. Moses, who led the first Exodus, and Elijah, the great prophet of Israel, appear alongside the king. As Luke 9:30-31 tells us, they appeared in glory and spoke of his departure. In the original Greek, his exodon, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. They aren't just reminiscing about an old desert crossing. They are handing over the mission to the new Moses. The glory radiating from Christ's face is more than a miracle. It is a glimpse of the final destination. The new Exodus is not heading for an earthly plot of land, but for the transfiguration of humanity itself. This is the promised land the King came to open, a path for his people to become partakers of the divine nature, as promised in 2 Peter 1:4. The summit of glory reveals that the march is about more than just a change of location. It is about a change of being. The church moves towards a new horizon where the light of God will not just be something we see, but something we share. This is the ultimate goal of the new Exodus, that the people who were once in darkness might finally walk in the unapproachable light of the King. The birth at Pentecost was not a chaotic explosion of individual experiences, but the unfolding of a precise and orderly life. As a newly gathered assembly began its march into the world, 4 distinct signatures, the 4 marks would become visible. These were the structural bones of the new Exodus, documented from the very first days. The assembly was one. They were not a collection of competing groups with differing messages. As it says in Acts 4:32, the full number of those who believed were of one heart and one soul. This unity was visible and total. The early Christians did not merely agree to disagree on the essentials. They were bound by the same mind and same judgment that St. Paul would later command in 1 Corinthians 1:10. They shared their lives and their resources, ensuring that the seamless garment of the church remained unrent by private preference. The assembly was holy. This was a people set apart, described in 1 Peter 2:9 as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. The holiness was not a private feeling, but a participation in the life of the King. They were being refined through a specific rhythm of life. As Acts 2:42 records, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. This was a fuel for their transformation, the new manna that made them a people unlike any other on earth. The assembly was Catholic. The fire of the new Sinai had burnt away the tribal boundaries of old. The mission was no longer for one ethnic group, but for the whole world. In Matthew 28:19, the King had commanded them to make disciples of all nations, and the new Exodus was revealed as a worldwide gathering, a home that refused to be limited by geography or race. Finally, the assembly was apostolic. The march followed a clear path because it followed the men the King had personally commissioned. This stability was a divine gift. As Jesus promised in John 16:13, the Spirit of truth would come to guide you into all truth. There was no confusion about the message because the people were devoted to the apostles' teaching. This is the household of God that St. Paul identifies in 1 Timothy 3:15 as a pillar and foundation of the truth. To ensure the signal remained pure, the march followed a specific pattern of transmission. As Paul commanded in 2 Thessalonians 2:15, the people were to stand firm and hold to the traditions taught them, whether by word of mouth or by letter. The church was not built on a book that dropped from the sky, but on a living foundation. As St. Paul would later write in Ephesians 2:20, the household of God is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ himself being the cornerstone. This was a visible chain of command that ensured the march would never lose its way. As a new exodus moves across the centuries, the greatest threat to the journey is not opposition from without, but the tearing from within. To maintain the march, the integrity of the body is not a luxury, it is a requirement. If the people scatter, the signal is lost. In 1 Corinthians 1:10, St. Paul issues a grave appeal that there be no divisions among the people. The word he uses in the original Greek is schismata, coming from the verb schizo, which means to violently tear or rend the fabric. For Paul, a divided church is not a diverse church, it is a mutilated one. He confronts the early signs of this tearing in 1 Corinthians 1:12-13, where people began to say, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos, or I follow Cephas. His response is a devastating question that echoes through every age of division. Is Christ divided? Without this unified structure, the marchers are left vulnerable to every passing trend. As Paul warns in Ephesians 4:14, you are no longer to be like children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine. The blueprint of the old Exodus reveals why this unity is essential for survival. When Israel moved through the wilderness, they did not follow a dozen different lights based on their private preferences. As Exodus 13:21 records, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and by night in a pillar of fire. There was only ever one pillar. Had the tribes split off to follow their own clouds, they would have perished in the desert, disconnected from the king's guidance. This requirement for a seamless unity was physically manifested at the foot of the cross. In John 19:23-24, the Roman soldiers looked at Jesus' tunic and saw it was seamless, woven from top to bottom. Even these pagan executioners who made a living through violence refused to tear, that is schizo, it. If the enemies of Christ had the sense to leave his physical garment whole, how much more of a scandal is it when his own followers tear his mystical body? The new Exodus requires the same mind and the same judgment, because you cannot reach a single destination with a shredded map. As a new Exodus advances, the king reveals that his people are more than a collection of marchers. They are a single living organism. In the narrative of 1 Corinthians 12, St. Paul moves from the metaphor of a garment to the biological reality of a body. This is the Body Protoco, a system where every part is dependent on its connection to the whole. In a body there is no such thing as independent parts. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 12, for just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. A limb that decides to move 500 yards away to start its own journey is not a diverse expression of life, it's an amputation. Without the circulatory system of apostolic succession, the lifeblood of authority passed from hand to hand, and a nervous system of a central authority, the visible head that coordinates the movement, the limb simply dies. The biological unity is what prevents the march from collapsing into the chaos seen in the time of the judges, where every man did what was right in his own eyes. In a body, the eye cannot say to the head, I have no need of you. Every member must be attached to the same visible structure to receive the same signal. This is why the world can look at the church and see a single moving force, rather than a scattered mob. Because God, as Paul declares in 1 Corinthians 14:33, is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace. He established a body that is visible and integrated as a king who founded it. In the quiet of the upper room, before the new Exodus passes through the Garden of Gethsemane and the grave, the king makes a final plea for the integrity of his people. His prayer in John 17 is a great commission of unity. He does not pray for a hidden internal agreement, but for a unity so complete and visible that the world itself is compelled to decide. This is a fulfillment of the ancient promise found in Isaiah 49:6, that God's people would be a light to the nations, reaching to the ends of the earth. A city set on a hill, as a king described in Matthew 5:14, cannot be hidden. But its light only serves as a guide if it remains a single, focused source. This is why Jesus prays in John 17:21 that his followers would be one, just as he and the Father are one, so that the world may believe that the Father sent him. In the journey of the church, unity is the power behind the mission. If the world looks at those who claim the king and sees only a scattered collection of competing groups, the light is fractured and the witness is dimmed. But when the world sees the complete unity described in John 17:23, it sees the truth of the king's message. This, so that, proves that a visible, undivided church is not an optional detail. It is the very proof the world needs to see to know that the king is real and that his message is true. As the march progresses, the king ensures the people are never left without a shepherd. Standing at the rock of Caesarea Philippi in Matthew 16:18, Jesus turns to Simon and bestows a new name, Peter, the rock, declaring, "On this rock I will build my church." He follows this by handing over the keys of the kingdom of heaven, establishing a specific office for the journey ahead. This transfer of authority is not a new concept. It fulfills the blueprint of the Davidic kingdom found in Isaiah 22:22, where the king places the key of the house of David on the shoulder of his chief steward Eliakim. When the king is away, the steward has authority to open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. By giving Peter the keys and the power to bind and loose in Matthew 16:19, Jesus is installing a visible administrator for the new Exodus. This office exists for the safety of the march. Just as Moses was commanded to appoint elders to judge the people in Numbers 11:16-17, the new Moses establishes a visible authority to keep the body unified. This is the keys of the kingdom. The structural assurance that the decisions made by the visible leaders on earth are ratified in heaven. It prevents the assembly falling into the chaos of the time of Judges, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes, and ensures the people remain locked onto the king's course. In the dry heat of the Sinai wilderness, the first assembly was kept alive by a gift from heaven, the manna that appeared with the dew. As Exodus 16:15 tells us, it was the bread the Lord had given them to eat, sufficient for the day, but unable to conquer death. In the new Exodus, the king provides a new manna that does not merely sustain the body, but transforms the soul. At the Last Supper, as recorded in Matthew 26:26, Jesus took bread, blessed it, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." This was not a symbol for the journey, it was the life of the king himself, given as a true fuel for the march. The reality of this gift is the centre of the new Exodus. In John 6:51, Jesus declares, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. This is the fuel for the transformation, the means by which the people of the march begin to participate in the divine nature. Just as the Israelites could not reach the promised land without the manna, the followers of the new Exodus cannot reach a destination of theosis without the cup of blessing and the participation in the body of Christ that St. Paul describes in 1 Corinthians 10:16. This is a supernatural bread for a supernatural journey, ensuring the life of the King flows through the veins of the entire body to strengthen it for the road ahead. The new Exodus does not end on a map or within the borders of an earthly kingdom. The first journey ended at the Jordan, with the tribes looking toward a land of milk and honey. But the new Exodus reaches beyond the horizons of this world, aiming for a destination that is not a place, but a participation. This is the mystery of theosis, the final transformation where the people of the march are not just rescued by God, but brought into the very life of God. In 2 Peter 1:4, the promise is made clear. We have been given precious and very great promises, so that we may become partakers in the divine nature. This is the ultimate promised land. The King did not lead his people out of the slavery of sin merely to leave them as better versions of themselves. He led them out so that they could be transformed to the image of his Son, as St. Paul writes in Romans 8:29. The journey is a process of being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, a reality recorded in 2 Corinthians 3:18. When the world looks at the church, it should see this mirrored glory, just as Moses' face shone with the light of God after being on the mountain. The lives of those of the new Exodus begin to radiate the holiness of the King. This is a witness that confirms the march is real. As 1 John 3:2 declares, we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. Theosis is the final act of rescue, where the seamless garment of the church is finally and fully united with the groom, and the people who began the march in the shadow of the Jordan find themselves standing in the eternal light of the Father's house. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Comment below. Next week we'll be talking about church leadership in detail. The Pope, the bishops and the magisterium. May God bless you and guide you. I'll see you then. Columna